congratulate all the young graduates for the degrees that you very deservedly earned today after very hard work. And on behalf of IGIDR, I also want to thank Professor Anand for the very erudite lecture, which is both scholarly at one level and very practical at another level. So let me give you my own advice. You're all entering into profession as economists at a very challenging time, especially challenging for economists. It's a challenge and an opportunity. A challenge because economics as a profession has been discredited, largely because of what happened during the crisis. It's an opportunity because you have an opportunity to regain the reputation and regain the credibility of economists. I said this last year also, when a few months after the crisis, the Queen went to the London School of Economics and she saw a number of economists there and said, "How come none of you saw the crisis coming?" So all of them were embarrassed and they gave some explanation. But in the event, nobody could actually give a convincing explanation of why economists could not see the crisis coming. Actually, the question that the Queen asked resonated with people around the world who felt let down by economists and economics. And we saw during the crisis that the reputation of economists got dented and the credibility of economics as a profession got eroded. And so we had a crisis. An economic crisis turned actually into a crisis for economics. Actually, in the years before the crisis, economics was a profession in the ascendancy. You heard of the Great Moderation, when around the world inflation was coming down, growth was stabilizing, everyone was happy, and economists thought that they had discovered the Holy Grail. Central bankers were very triumphant. And economists were a hallowed profession. I don't know how many of you read that book, Freakonomics, and a number of other books. They thought of very obscure questions like, what do sumo wrestlers and school teachers have in common? Why do drug dealers live with their mothers? I mean, these questions do not occur to us normally, but economists thought of these questions, thought of very sophisticated answers to these questions, and everybody was overawed by the profession of economists. So economists were called upon to pronounce on practically every problem that was plaguing us. All that crashed once the crisis happened, because the blame was squarely on economists as a profession. The crisis actually threw up two questions. What went wrong with economics and what can be done about it? I can't help giving you some advice, and I would relate to what Professor Anand said as part of my remarks. One of the things about economics is that economists thought that they could turn economics into a hard science like physics. There's some people who say that economists suffered from physics envy, that they started looking upon economics as a hard science, as a science that is subject to immutable laws. Actually, if you think about it, there are similarities between economics and physics. How many of you students studied physics after school? Okay, some of you did. Now, if you think about it, you will see some parallels between physics and economics. Okay. For example, take the theory of rational expectations in economics. What does the theory of rational expectations say? It says that prices and wages adjust automatically and instantaneously to changes anywhere in the economic system. Okay. That has a similarity with Newton's law of gravitation. What does Newton's law of gravitation say? Newton's law of gravitation says that if one object in the entire universe changes position, the entire gravitational configuration of the universe changes instantaneously, right? So there is a similarity between the theory of rational expectations in economics and the theory of gravity in physics. To give you another example, Keynes' theory of, what did Keynes say? He said a lot of things, but one of the things he said was that there is a certain inescapable uncertainty in our ability to measure risk, right? And there is a parallel in physics. You have the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, which says that you cannot determine the position and momentum of a particle with absolute certainty at the same time. It's just impossible. It's against the laws of the universe. So if you think about it, there are similarities between physics and economics. But the similarities are limited. You should not extrapolate the similarities. You should not draw too many inferences from the similarities. Actually, economics is not like physics, because economics is a social science, physics is a natural science. It's a hard science. The laws of physics are immutable. They do not change. The laws of economics change depending on the circumstances. For example, the mass of an electron does not change by my behavior, right? But the price of a derivative changes by your behavior. The way you go and behave in the stock market, you can't change the price of a derivative. There are, in economics, we have this law, savings is equal to investment, supply is equal to demand, but there is nothing, this is what classical economics says, but there is nothing immutable about it. There is no God-given law which says that supply has to equal to demand or savings has to equal to investment. But there are God-given laws, I think they're given by God, I don't know who, but there are laws of physics which are immutable. For example, you have I think the second law of thermodynamics, heat loss is equal to heat gain. You cannot change that, right? So, economics is different from physics. Also, you take, something similar to what Professor Anand said. Actually, academic pursuits are two-way streets, from theory to practice and from practice to theory. I wonder if economics is a two-way street. Okay? Physics, for example, is a two-way street. You go from theory to practical. For example, this Michelson-Morley experiment in physics, which found that the velocity of light is constant. That they found in experiment, and then they were trying to construct a theory about it. And the special theory of relativity came and explained how velocity of light is constant. So what was found in practice, you build a theory around it. Similarly, you can actually go from theory to practice. Now you have particle physics, and particle physics has predicted what is Higgs boson, a God particle, which we have not found so far. Because the theory has predicted that a Higgs boson must exist, now physicists are actually experimenting to find out if there is a Higgs boson. Does that work in economics? Can you construct a theory in absolute terms and then say that the practice has to be like that? I'm not sure that's the case. In economics, you're conditioned by human behavior. You take human behavior as given and you construct your laws around that, and if human behavior changes, your laws change. Okay. Actually, there's some people who say that the economists are types who, if something works in practice, they go and find out if it works in theory. Okay. Actually, they say that as a joke, but I don't see the joke. Actually, that's the way it should be, no? Economics should always traverse from practice to theory. If something works in the real world, you construct a theory about it. You do not go into theory and say that the real world must behave like this, because you cannot dictate the behavior to the real world. Okay. So, what I'm saying is that the real world behaves in a very capricious, complex way. You cannot predetermine how the world behaves. You have to take the world as given and then apply economics to that. I also have a lot of other things to say about economics and physics. I will not say about it now. But I want to tell you that, as Professor Anand said, in translating theory to practice, in translating what you've learned here earlier in your education, what you've learned in IDIDR, into practical policy, remember that it's a very complex transformation, because you have to be very careful, as he said, about the terminology, about